I didn't think cold could feel like this, like tiny knives pressed into bone, like punishment that never ended. My fingers were numb again. Not the kind of numb that tingles when warmth returns, but the deep, aching cold that settles into your joints and whispers that something is wrong, that you're being left behind. I tucked my hands under my arms as I walked home from school, the January wind cutting through my thin jacket like I was made of paper. Emma had warm gloves. I'd seen them that morning, soft cream-coloured cashmere lined with silk, a gift from Mother for her 16th birthday last week. She'd held them up to the light in our shared bedroom, smiling at how they caught the pale winter sun, while my own hands stayed buried in my pockets. "Olivia, didn't you have gloves?" Father had asked at breakfast, his voice distant, already thinking about his morning meeting. "I can't find them," I'd said quietly. "You're always losing things." Mother's sigh was familiar, practiced. "Emma never loses anything." Emma had looked at me across the table, and for just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, never guilt, something sharper. Satisfaction, maybe? Or just indifference to the fact that my old navy gloves, the ones I'd kept carefully in my coat pocket every single day, had vanished from our room 3 days ago. I knew she'd taken them. I knew the way I knew that the sun would set, that winter would end, that I would always come second. But knowing and proving were different countries, and I'd never learned how to cross that border. The apartment building rose before me, grey concrete against a greyer sky. 5 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. My hands were so cold now that I couldn't feel my fingertips. I tried to warm them with my breath as I climbed, watching the fog dissipate into nothing, like every small kindness I'd tried to show myself. Inside, the apartment was warm. Emma was already home, sprawled on the sofa with her phone, those cream gloves placed carefully on the side table like precious objects. She didn't look up when I entered. "Dinner's in an hour," Mother called from the kitchen. "Emma, set the table. Olivia, do your homework quietly. Your father has a headache." I went to our bedroom and sat at my small desk by the window. My fingers were starting to burn now as feeling returned, the painful threshold between frozen and functional. I flexed them slowly, watching the white patches fade to mottled red. Through the thin wall, I could hear Father's voice rising, frustrated about something at work. Mother's softer murmur in response. The familiar symphony of a household where I was background noise, a minor character in Emma's story. I pulled out my math homework, but my hands were shaking. Not from cold anymore. From something deeper, colder than January wind. From the accumulated weight of being invisible, of being the daughter they fed and housed but never truly saw. That night at dinner, Father praised Emma's test scores. Mother showed us the dress she'd bought for Emma's upcoming school dance. I ate my rice in silence, my still aching hands wrapped around the bowl for warmth. "Olivia, you're 19 now," Father said suddenly, and I looked up, surprised to be addressed. "You should be thinking about your future, about work, maybe. Emma will go to university, of course, but you—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound too harsh. "You could find something practical, help with expenses. Emma would go to university. I could find work, the equation of my life stated plainly over dinner." "Yes, Father," I said, because what else was there to say? Later, when Emma was in the bathroom, I saw my old navy gloves tucked behind her jewellery box, deliberately hidden, but not hidden enough. She'd wanted me to find them eventually, wanted me to know and be unable to do anything about it. I didn't take them back. What would be the point? To start a fight I couldn't win? To hear Mother sigh and say I was being dramatic, that Emma wouldn't do such a thing. I left them there and went to bed with cold hands and a colder heart. The days blurred together after that. February came with more snow, more cold, more mornings where my fingers burned and ached. I started taking longer routes home from my part-time job at the bookstore, postponing the moment when I'd have to return to the apartment, to the sounds of Emma's laughter and Mother's praise and Father's quiet disappointment in my very existence. The bookstore became my refuge. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, was a kind woman in her 60s who never asked questions about why I volunteered to work the closing shift, why I stayed late to reorganise shelves that didn't need reorganising. She'd make tea in the back room and leave a cup for me, wordlessly, steam rising in the dim light. "Your hands look terrible," she said one evening, catching sight of the cracked, reddened skin. "It's just the weather," I said. "It's January in the city. Everyone's cold, but not everyone looks like they're being punished by winter itself." She disappeared into the back and returned with a small tin of hand cream. "Use this, and buy proper gloves, Olivia. You're worth the investment." I took the tin but said nothing. Worth the investment. As if I'd ever been taught to think of myself in those terms. One evening, I walked past a store window and saw gloves on display, thick wool ones, lined with fleece, the kind that promised real warmth. $20. I had 23 in my wallet from my bookstore wages. I stood there for a long time, my frozen hands pressed against the cold glass, looking at those gloves. Something in me wanted them desperately, but $20 was also 3 lunches or the extra money Mother had asked me to contribute to groceries this month, or the bus fare I'd need for work next week, or... "Olivia?" I turned. David stood behind me, his scarf wrapped high against the wind. He was Emma's boyfriend, had been for 6 months. Handsome in that easy way some people are, with kind eyes that never quite looked at me long enough to really see. "No gloves?" he asked, nodding at my red chapped hands. "I lost them," I said automatically. "In this weather?" His brow furrowed with what looked like concern. "That's dangerous. You could get frostbite." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I smiled the small, apologetic smile I'd perfected over 19 years of being Olivia, the lesser daughter, the overlooked one. "I'll be fine," I said. He looked at me for a moment longer, and I thought, maybe this time someone would see. Maybe this time someone would ask the right questions, would notice that Emma's new cashmere gloves had appeared the same week mine disappeared. "Well, stay warm," he said, already pulling out his phone to text someone. Emma, probably. "See you around." He walked away, and I stood there alone in the cold, watching my breath turn to mist and vanish. I walked home the long way that night, past the park where families were sledding, past the coffee shop where couples sat in warm booths, past all the lit windows of lives that looked nothing like mine. My hands went from painful to numb, to something worse, a deep ache that felt like it was eating into my bones. When I finally climbed the 5 flights to our apartment, I could barely grip the railing. Inside, Emma was showing Mother her dress for the school dance. It was red, beautiful, expensive. "Olivia, you're late," Mother said, not looking at me. "Your dinner's cold." "Sorry," I whispered. "And you're dripping water everywhere. Go change." I looked down. Snow had melted into my thin jacket, soaked through to my shirt. I hadn't even noticed. I went to our room and sat on my bed, trying to unbutton my jacket with fingers that wouldn't cooperate. Emma came in, humming, her cashmere gloves draped over her arm. "The dance is going to be amazing," she said to her reflection in the mirror. Not to me. "David's renting a car. We're going to dinner first at that French place downtown." I didn't respond. I was trying to peel off my wet socks, but my hands were shaking too badly. "You should come to my dance," Emma said suddenly, turning to me. "You could help in the coat check. They need volunteers." Help in the coat check, hold coats and purses while she danced, be useful, invisible, a piece of furniture in her perfect evening. "I have to work," I said. "You're always working. Don't you ever want to have fun?" Fun. As if fun was something available to both of us equally, as if we stood on the same ground and I was simply choosing differently. "I need the money," I said quietly. For what? You live at home. It's not like you have real expenses. She turned back to her mirror, already bored with the conversation. You should spend some on yourself. Maybe get a nice dress or something. You always look so... She trailed off, but I knew the word. Plain, dull, forgettable. That night, I couldn't sleep. My hands were burning again, the skin cracked and painful. I lay in the dark listening to Emma's soft breathing from her bed across the room, and I thought about those gloves in the window. About $20. About all the small ways I'd learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less expensive, less troublesome. I thought about Miss Patterson's words, "You're worth the investment." I thought about Father's words, "Emma will go to university. You could find something practical." I thought about Mother's sigh, "You're always losing things." At 2 a.m. I got up and went to the bathroom. In the mirror, my face looked pale, drawn, older than 19, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. There were dark circles under my eyes that had become permanent somewhere between 15 and now. My hair hung limp and dull because I used the cheapest shampoo, saving the better bottles Mother bought for Emma's thick, shining curls. My lips were chapped from the cold and from the habit I'd developed of biting them when I was nervous, which was always. I looked at this girl in the mirror and felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even sadness. Just a vast, empty recognition that this was all there would ever be. I thought, this is my life. This is all my life will ever be. And something in me, some small flame I didn't know I still carried, simply went out. I went back to bed. I closed my eyes. And in the morning, I didn't wake up. There was no drama to it. No one noticed at first. Emma left for school, complaining about her hair. Mother went to her yoga class. Father took a morning meeting from home, his voice carrying through the walls about quarterly reports and budget cuts. It wasn't until noon, when Mrs. Patterson called the apartment asking where I was, that anyone thought to check on me. Mother found me first. I heard her scream, distant and strange, as if coming from the bottom of a well. Then Father's heavy footsteps, Emma's voice high and frightened. The paramedics arrived, but there was nothing urgent to do. I'd been gone for hours peacefully in my sleep. But she was fine yesterday, Mother kept saying, her voice breaking. She was fine. She was always fine. Fine. That word I'd used like armour, like camouflage. I'm fine. Everything's fine. The funeral was small. Colleagues from the bookstore came. Mrs. Patterson cried, which surprised me. I hadn't known she cared that much. A few classmates attended out of obligation, looking uncomfortable in their dark clothes. Mother cried. Father looked genuinely shocked, as if he'd never quite realised I could cease to exist. Emma stood pale and silent, holding David's hand. I watched it all from somewhere else, somewhere dark and quiet, where the cold finally didn't matter anymore. I watched Emma go into our room after the funeral and find my navy gloves behind her jewellery box. I watched her hold them, her face crumpling, and I wondered if she was thinking about cause and effect, about small cruelties that accumulate like snow until they bury you. I watched Mother clean out my desk and find the tin of hand cream Mrs. Patterson had given me, barely used because I'd been saving it. I watched Father discover the small notebook where I'd calculated my savings, tracked my expenses, planned a future I'd never have. $23 in my wallet. Not enough for gloves, not enough for anything. And then the darkness pulled me deeper, and I stopped watching, stopped being, stopped everything, until I opened my eyes. I was in our bedroom. The same cream-coloured walls, the same narrow window looking out at grey sky. Emma's bed, across from mine, neatly made. My small desk in the corner. I sat up slowly. My hands, I looked at them. Whole, unscarred, the skin smooth and young, no cracks, no redness. On my phone, January 12th. The same date, the same morning, 3 days before my gloves disappeared. I should have been shocked. Terrified, maybe, or confused, but instead I felt something settle into place inside me, like a bone finally snapping back into alignment. I knew what this was. I knew what had been given to me. Another chance. Not to save them, or fix them, or make them love me. A chance to save myself. I got out of bed carefully, testing this new reality. Everything was the same. The same water stains on the ceiling. The same traffic sounds from the street below. The same muffled voices of my parents in the kitchen. Father complaining about his coffee. Mother reminding him about his afternoon meeting. I went to my coat, hanging by the door. In the pocket, my navy gloves, still there, still mine. I took them carefully, feeling their weight in my hands. Cheap acrylic fibre, the kind that doesn't really keep you warm, but is better than nothing. I'd bought them myself 2 years ago with babysitting money. They'd been mine, truly mine, and Emma had taken them just to prove she could. Not this time. I put them in my school bag, zipped into the inner compartment where Emma couldn't reach them without me knowing. At breakfast, Father was reading his newspaper. Mother was making tea. Emma came in yawning, her hair still messy from sleep, beautiful even first thing in the morning because that was simply who she was. I ate my congee quietly, watching them all with new eyes. These people who had raised me and forgotten me in the same breath. These people who would mourn me when I was gone, but never truly see me while I lived. "Olivia, you're staring," Mother said, not looking up from her tea. "Sorry," I said softly, but I wasn't, not anymore. The next 3 days, I was vigilant. I kept my gloves with me always, in my bag at school, in my locker during gym class, in my pocket when I walked home. I watched Emma watching me, her eyes tracking my movements, trying to figure out when to take them, where I'd hidden them. On the second night, I woke to the sound of careful rustling. Emma was at my school bag, her phone's flashlight casting shadows across the room. I lay still, eyes barely open, watching her search through my things. She found the gloves in the inner pocket, pulled them out, examined them in the dim light. For a long moment, she just held them. Then she tucked them back and returned to her bed. She hadn't taken them, not yet. She was learning my patterns, figuring out the best time to strike. On the third night, I caught her going through my bag again. "Lose something?" I asked from the doorway. She jumped, her hand freezing inside my bag. Then her face smoothed into practiced innocence. "I thought I left my lip balm in here. We have the same bag." We didn't have the same bag. Hers was pink, mine was black. But I didn't argue. "I haven't seen it," I said, and went to bed. I heard her searching a while longer before giving up with a frustrated sigh. The next morning was Emma's birthday. 16 years old today, though she'd been 16 in my first life too. Time was a circle, and I was trapped in its loop. Mother presented her with the cream cashmere gloves at breakfast. Emma accepted them with practiced delight, holding them up to the light exactly as I remembered, smiling as the pale winter sun caught the soft fibres. But this time, when she glanced at me across the breakfast table, I was wearing my navy gloves. I'd put them on before coming to breakfast, a silent declaration. I met her eyes steadily, and something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe, or the first hint of frustration that her plan had been disrupted. She'd wanted me to be without them, wanted me to be cold while she was warm, wanted that visible proof of the difference between us, the hierarchy that everyone pretended didn't exist, but everyone knew. I smiled slightly and looked away, pulling my gloves off to eat. "Those gloves look worn," Mother commented, glancing at my navy ones on the table. "They work fine," I said. "Emma's are much nicer. Cashmere is so much warmer than acrylic." "I'm sure," I said, and ate my breakfast in silence. That day after school, I stopped at the store window again. The wool gloves were still there, thick and warm and promising. $20. I had 23 in my wallet, same as before. But this time, something was different. I was different. I thought about my first life, about dying with cracked hands, and $23 in my wallet because I'd believed that warmth was a luxury I hadn't earned. I thought about Mrs. Patterson's words, echoing across death itself. You're worth the investment. I went inside. The woman at the register smiled as she wrapped the gloves. Cold day for thin gloves, she said, nodding at my navy ones. That's why I'm upgrading, I said. She rang me up and I handed over $20 like it was nothing. Like it was simply what you did. You got cold, you bought gloves. Simple, obvious. The kind of basic self-care that shouldn't have felt revolutionary. Outside, I put them on immediately. They were perfect. Soft, warm, substantial. The wool was thick enough to block the wind, the fleece lining like a gentle embrace. My hands disappeared into their warmth, like coming home to a place I'd never been. I walked back to the apartment slowly, taking my time, feeling the difference. Not just in temperature, but in intention. I had chosen this warmth. I had decided I was worth $20, worth warm hands, worth taking care of. When I got home, Emma was on the sofa, homework spread around her. She noticed immediately. New gloves? She asked, her voice carefully casual. Yes, I said. Where did you get them? The store on 5th. How much were they? $20. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What about contributing to groceries? Mother asked you to chip in this month. I'll contribute next week, I said calmly. I needed gloves. Mother looked up from her magazine on the armchair. Olivia, those look expensive. You could have asked. We might have... I took care of it, I interrupted gently. Father lowered his newspaper. Olivia, we discussed this. You need to learn financial responsibility. I am being financially responsible, I said. I'm preventing frostbite so I don't miss work and lose income. It's an investment in my ability to keep earning. The logic was unassailable. Father opened his mouth, then closed it. Mother looked uncertain. Only Emma seemed genuinely bothered, her face tight with something she couldn't quite name. Resentment, maybe, or the disorienting realization that I'd stepped outside the script we'd all been following. That evening, I wore my new gloves while I did the dishes. They got wet, but they dried quickly. They were made for weather, for work, for actual use. Not like Emma's cashmere ones, which she treated like museum pieces. You're really wearing them inside? Emma asked, watching me from the doorway. My hands are cold, I said simply. The apartment is heated. Not enough for me. She studied me for a long moment. You're being weird. Am I? Yes. You're being... different. I dried the last plate and set it in the rack. Maybe I just got tired of being cold. Over the next weeks, I made other small changes. I stopped staying late at family dinners when I had early work shifts, simply excusing myself and leaving. Mother looked surprised the first time, as if she'd never considered that I might have somewhere else to be, something else that mattered. I stopped offering to help Emma with her homework when she'd never once helped me with mine. She asked once, twice, then seemed to realise I wasn't going to volunteer anymore and stopped asking. I stopped apologising for taking up space, for existing, for being the daughter they hadn't quite wanted. When I came home, I said hello and went to my room. When I left, I said goodbye and went. I stopped performing, the invisible labour of trying to make them comfortable with my presence. And they noticed. Olivia's been different lately, I heard Mother tell Father one evening. I was in my room, but the walls were thin. How so? I don't know. Distant. She used to be so... obliging. Obliging, the word for a child who's learned that compliance is survival, that silence is safety, that making yourself small is how you earn the right to exist. Maybe she's growing up, Father said without much interest. 19 is almost 20. She should be thinking about her future. But Emma knew better. Emma watched me with increasing frustration as I slipped away from her, as the silent audience for her life's performance gradually exited the theatre. At the bookstore, Mrs. Patterson commented on the change as too, but differently. "You look better," she said one afternoon, watching me shelve returns. "Less grey. Grey. Like you've been living in a shadow. Now you've stepped into some light." She smiled. "The gloves helped?" I looked down at my hands, warm and protected. "More than you know." "Good. Everyone deserves warm hands, Olivia. It's not a luxury, it's basic dignity." Basic dignity. I repeated the phrase to myself later, walking home through the February cold. My hands were warm. My hands were mine. Such a small thing, and yet it had cracked open the door to a different way of being. One evening, David came over for dinner. He was polite, charming, the kind of boyfriend parents approve of. He complimented Mother's cooking and discussed sports with Father and held Emma's hand under the table. Midway through the meal, he turned to me. "Olivia, Emma mentioned you work at Patterson's bookstore." "Yes," I said. "Do you like it?" I looked at him, surprised by the direct question. "Very much." "What do you like about it?" "The quiet, the order, the way stories wait on shelves for the right person." I paused. "And Mrs. Patterson is kind?" "Emma said you work a lot of hours." "I do." "Saving up for something?" I glanced at Emma. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," I said. "I haven't decided yet." "That's wise," David said. "Having options is important." Emma's hand tightened on his. "Olivia's always been practical," she said, and there was an edge to her voice I couldn't quite identify. After dinner, I excused myself to do dishes. David followed me to the kitchen. "Need help?" he asked. "I'm fine, thank you." He leaned against the counter, watching me work. "Can I ask you something?" "Okay." "Are you happy?" I stopped, hands in the soapy water. "That's a strange question." "Is it? You're Emma's sister. I've been dating her for months, but I barely know you. You're always working, always quiet. I just wondered." I looked at him properly then. He seemed genuinely curious, not just making conversation. "I'm learning to be," I said carefully. "Learning to be happy?" "Learning what that might look like for me." He nodded slowly. "That's fair. Emma's lucky to have you as a sister." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Why do you think that?" "Because you're steady, you're real. She's wonderful, but she's used to everything being easy. You make things look effortless, even when they're not." He left the kitchen then, and I stood there with my hands in the warm water, thinking about his words. You make things look effortless. Was that what I'd been doing? Making my struggle invisible so everyone could stay comfortable? Not anymore. In early March, the weather turned bitter. A late winter storm swept through the city, bringing ice and wind that cut through everything. I wore my wool gloves every day, and my hands never ached, never burned with cold. Emma wore her cashmere gloves once and complained they weren't warm enough. Mother bought her a second pair, leather this time, lined with rabbit fur. I said nothing. But I noticed that Emma started watching my gloves with something that looked almost like envy. They were practical, warm, unpretentious. They did what gloves were supposed to do. One afternoon, we were both in our room, doing homework. Emma looked up suddenly. "Can I try on your gloves?" I looked at her, surprised. "Why?" "I just want to see if they're as warm as they look." I took them off and handed them over. She put them on, flexing her fingers, feeling the warmth. "These are really nice," she said quietly. $20 at the store on 5th. "That's cheap." "Affordable," I corrected. There's a difference. She took them off and handed them back. Mine were $80. I know. They're not as warm as yours. No, I agreed. They're not designed for warmth. They're designed to look expensive. She was quiet for a moment. Then, do you hate me? The question surprised me. I considered it honestly. No, I said finally. I don't hate you, Emma. But you don't like me. I don't really know you. We've lived together for 19 years, but I don't think we've ever really seen each other. Whose fault is that? Does it matter? Fault doesn't change what is. She looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she turned back to her homework, and we sat in silence. That night, I heard her crying softly in her bed. I lay in the dark, listening, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a quiet acknowledgement that something between us was ending, had maybe always been ending. In late March, David and Emma broke up. I heard the fight through the door, Emma's voice rising, David staying calm and firm. You never think about anyone but yourself. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked about someone else's day? When was the last time you noticed when someone was struggling? I notice. Do you? Did you notice your sister working herself to exhaustion? Did you notice she didn't have proper gloves all winter? There was a silence. Then, that's not my responsibility. Maybe not, but it says something about who you are. And I don't think I can be with someone who sees the world that way. The door opened. David left without looking back. Emma stood in the doorway, her face streaked with tears, and saw me in the kitchen. You heard? Yes. Are you happy now? I set down my tea. Why would I be happy about this? Because he left me. Because I'm alone. You're not alone, Emma. You're just not the centre of someone's world anymore. There's a difference. She stared at me. When did you become so cold? When I stopped dying from being too warm-hearted. I walked past her to our room, and she didn't follow. The next morning, I found Emma in the kitchen early, making coffee. Her eyes were red. I took your gloves, she said without preamble. Back in January, in the other... She stopped, looking confused. I know, I said. How do you know? I didn't do it. I was going to, but you kept them with you. I looked at her carefully. She didn't remember. The rebirth was mine alone, my private knowledge. I just knew you would, I said. It seemed like something you'd do. She flinched. That's harsh. But not wrong. She was quiet for a long moment, then... I'm sorry for being the way I am, for not seeing you. Okay, I said. Is that all? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? I do. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past, Emma. It doesn't make us close. It just means I'm not carrying anger anymore. So what now? Now we're sisters who live in the same house until one of us moves out. We're polite, we're civil, but we're not friends. Tears filled her eyes again. That's so sad. Maybe, I said, but it's honest, and I'm done pretending. April brought warmer weather. I put my wool gloves away carefully, folded in my drawer with tissue paper to keep them fresh. I'd need them again next winter. But next winter I might not be here. I'd been saving more aggressively, taking extra shifts, cutting expenses. The small notebook where I tracked everything showed a steady increase. By summer, I'd have enough for a security deposit. By fall, I could move out. One Saturday morning, Father called me into his study. Sit down, Olivia. I sat, curious. He rarely spoke to me directly. Your mother tells me you've been saving money. Yes, a substantial amount. For my... And income, yes. What for? A security deposit. For an apartment. His eyebrows rose. You're planning to move out? Yes, probably in the fall. You're 19. Most young women live at home until they marry. I don't plan to marry anytime soon. And I'd like my own space. He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. You've changed, he said finally. Have I? You used to be so quiet, so easy. Easy, like obliging, but worse. Easy to overlook, easy to forget, easy to use. I'm still quiet, I said, just not silent. Your mother is worried. She thinks you're pulling away from the family. I am, I said simply. Not with anger, just with intention. I'm building a life that works for me. And this life doesn't include us. It includes you at appropriate distances. Holidays, maybe, phone calls, but not daily involvement. Not the weight of constantly trying to earn my place at a table that was never really set for me. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I didn't realize you felt that way. I know, I said gently. That's part of the problem. He let me go then, looking older than I'd ever seen him. That evening, Mother asked me to stay after dinner. Emma had gone to her room, Father to his study. Olivia, we need to talk. I waited. Your father told me about your plans to move out. Yes. I don't understand. Have we done something wrong? I looked at this woman who'd raised me without seeing me, who'd loved me in the abstract but never in the specific. You haven't done anything wrong, I said. You've just never done anything particularly right either. You fed me, housed me, educated me. You did your duty, but you never saw me as someone who mattered beyond obligation. That's not true, isn't it? When's my birthday, Mother? She hesitated. April. June, I said quietly. June 15th. I turned 19 4 months ago. Her face went pale. When's Emma's birthday? I asked. January 14th, she said immediately. Yes, because Emma matters. Emma is seen. I'm just the other one, the easy one, the one who doesn't need attention because she never asks for it. Olivia, I'm not angry, I said and meant it. I'm just done. I'm done trying to earn what should have been freely given. I'm done making myself small. I'm moving out and I'm moving on, and I hope we can have a polite, distant relationship, but that's all I have to offer. I left her sitting at the table, tears in her eyes, and felt nothing but relief. By June, I'd found a studio apartment across town. It was small, barely more than a room with a kitchenette, but it had good heating and a window that got morning sun. The rent was manageable with my bookstore income and a second part-time job I'd taken at a cafe. I signed the lease with my own money, my own name, my own future written in ink. Moving day was quiet. I didn't ask for help. I hired a small moving service for my few pieces of furniture. A bed frame I'd bought second-hand, a desk from a yard sale, a small bookshelf. I carried my boxes myself methodically, efficiently. Mother and Father were at work. I'd timed it deliberately. Emma was home. She stood in the doorway of our soon-to-be former room, watching me pack the last box. You're really leaving, she said. Yes. Are you ever coming back? For visits, maybe. Holidays, but not to live. I'm going to miss you. I looked at her. She looked genuinely sad, and I believed her. But missing someone and valuing them are different things. You'll be fine, I said. You've always been fine. That's not fair. You're making me sound shallow. I'm not trying to. I'm just being honest. You've never needed me, Emma. You might miss having me here, but you don't need me. And that's okay. Not everyone has to matter to everyone. I picked up the last box and walked to the door. She followed me. Olivia? I turned. I'm sorry. For everything. For taking your gloves, for not seeing you, for being selfish. I'm sorry. I know, I said. And I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean staying. I left her standing in the apartment doorway and didn't look back. The first night in my apartment, I ordered takeout and ate it sitting on my floor in the empty space. The heating worked perfectly. I was warm all over, warm down to my bones. I unpacked my wool gloves and hung them in the closet, ready for next winter. Next to them, I hung my old navy gloves, the ones Emma had taken in that other life, the ones that had become a symbol of everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed. I'd kept them as a reminder, not of pain, but of the moment I decided that warmth mattered, that I mattered, that my cold hands were not a minor inconvenience, but a sign of something deeper that needed to change. That night, I lay in my new bed, in my new space, and thought about my first life. The cold, the invisibility, the slow death by 1,000 small neglects. I thought about dying with cracked hands and $23 in my wallet, a girl who'd never learned that she was worth investing in. And I thought about this second chance, this strange gift of rebirth. It hadn't been about saving my family or teaching them a lesson. It had been about saving myself. The wool gloves had been the beginning. That small act of choosing warmth, of deciding I deserved it. From there, everything else had followed. The boundaries, the distance, the slow construction of a life that was mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Did you really leave? I looked at it for a long time, then I typed back. Yes? Another buzz. Are you coming back? No. A pause, then. I understand. I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much, a studio with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting. But it was mine. Mine in a way nothing had ever been before. Outside, summer rain began to fall, gentle and warm. I listened to it tapping against my window in my home, in my life. When winter came again, I would be here. I would wear my warm gloves. I would walk to work through snow and cold, and my hands would never ache, never burn, never go numb. I would be warm, and I would be free, and I would be mine. The next morning, I woke to the sunlight streaming through my window. I made coffee in my own kitchen, sat at my own desk, looked out at the city from my own vantage point. Mrs. Patterson called to confirm my shift at the bookstore. "How's the new place?" she asked. "Perfect," I said. "Good. You deserve it, Olivia. You deserve warm hands and a warm home and a life that fits you." After we hung up, I sat with those words for a while. You deserve it. Such a simple statement, but it had taken me 19 years and a death and a rebirth to believe it. I looked at my hands. Whole, healthy, mine. I thought about Emma's cashmere gloves, beautiful and useless. I thought about my wool ones, practical and warm. I thought about all the ways we'd been different, she and I, and how those differences had defined us. She'd had everything handed to her and never learned its value. I'd had nothing and learned to create value from choice and intention. In the end, we'd both been shaped by our circumstances, but only one of us had chosen to reshape ourselves. I stood up and went to my closet. I took out my wool gloves and held them, feeling their weight, their promise of warmth. Then I put them back carefully and closed the closet door. Winter would come again. Cold would come again. Hardship and difficulty and all the small sufferings of being human would come again. But I would be ready. I would be warm, and I would walk alone, by choice, into whatever came next. That was enough. That was everything. I smiled in the quiet morning light of my small apartment, my hands warm, my heart finally at peace, my life finally, completely, irrevocably my own.